I'm pigged on Luka, smoke you like my hookah. Pump fake right, then I step back in illusion. That's a boss move maneuver, billionaire entrepreneur. Mark Cuban on the viewer, put you rookies on a skewer. I stay shitting on you boys like I came up from the sewer. Used to have a lot of dollars, now I got a lot fewer. What you saying to me? I hope you save it for me. I'm about to kill the game, and I put it in my testimony.
Hi, welcome to the Mainstream Mavs podcast. This is your host, Will. I'm joined here by my co-host, Jaren.
What is up, guys?
Today, we are going to be getting into the Mavericks 118-115 double overtime victory versus the Los Angeles Lakers at Crypto.com Arena. The Mavericks were able to pull through late last night. Jaren and I had some issues in terms of when we were watching the game, so we weren't able to get the podcast out last night just due to how late the game was. But nonetheless, we were able to watch it, and we're doing it now, of course. And, I guess before we go ahead and go to the ad break, brief summation of this game, right? This was a game that the Mavericks, with, Anthony Davis being out for the Lakers, you could really see just how sort of devoid of offense this Lakers team is when they can't shoot. I mean, you hear it on national television all the time, and we see all the news outlets talking about their egregious numbers in terms of how many threes they're missing every game, but getting to actually see it and, watching it up front, obviously we weren't there, but watching on TV, it's a whole different experience just in terms of how many threes they're missing. I know we played them Christmas Day, but they were actually able to get hot for a brief moment there in the first half and were able to make some threes. Lonnie Walker was still playing, their leading three-point percentage player in that game, as was Austin Reeves, who I believe is number 2. So, they still had a little bit of shooting, but in a game like this, they were just completely devoid of life outside of LeBron-generated offense, which was just bully ball, getting to the rim or getting offensive rebounds and putting it back up. Yet the Mavericks still let them get back into the game, which was quite the disappointment. The Mavericks were essentially led completely by Luka Doncic's 35-point triple-double, including 2 step-back threes to first send the game to overtime, then to send the game to double overtime. Luka definitely tapped into the clutch bag despite a very, very lackluster defensive night, to say the least, as well as did Christian Wood, who had an outstanding defensive game against what most would probably label a pretty grim Lakers big man rotation, especially with Anthony Davis out. But nonetheless, he pulled through and had a great game on the glass as well as defending. And I mean, the dynamism with him and Luka and the pick and roll at times in that third quarter was on full display. He had a great game. Tim Hardaway Jr. and Spencer Dinwiddie had a great game, both, respectively, just shooting, coming off of screens. In Spencer's case, he did a much better job in this game of asserting himself and attacking. But, the Mavericks, the reason that they fell short in this game and ended up being so close. And, while it was an impressive clutch time victory, it definitely wasn't a impressive game by the Mavericks holistically. They definitely missed the mark against a very, very untalented Lakers team outside of LeBron James, who is a Lakers team that is missing, just quite a bit. They have really voids to fill at almost every particular spot that an NBA basketball team could possibly kind of imagine.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it was not an impressive win by the Mavericks, and they let a lot of things slip defensively that we'll get into that we're not impressed by any stretch of the imagination. But a win is a win, like we keep saying, and this Mavericks team continues their trend of getting bad but yet impressive clutch time victory wins. What was your brief reaction to the game, Jaren, before we hit to the ad break?
Yeah, I mean, it was a hard-fought battle. A lot of players were going at it. Luka got hit in the face multiple times and kicked in the body. Same with Christian Wood. Same with LeBron.
He got tricked by Russell Westbrook twice.
Yeah, Russell Westbrook twice. I mean, it was just, a hard-fought game. Really physical down low. Dwight Powell, Christian Wood, I felt like that was a pretty good little duo that kept going on. Offensively, at least, this might be like the first showcase of them actually like showing some sort of offensive life.
This is the first time that, they've when they play them together offensively, it sometimes is counterintuitive to because, you're taking away one of the guys rolling at the threats and, kind of sacrificing, the on-court spatial parity and all that sort of stuff. But this was one of the first games that, I think we can say like definitively, like offensively, when they did that, it was actually a good move by Jason Kidd.
No, for sure. I mean, outside of that, offensively, he had 5 blocks and like 3 clutch blocks on Westbrook and LeBron, that being. And I mean, the Lakers squad, yes, very depleted, but I mean, as you alluded to, a win's a win. The Mavericks pull this one out. And yeah, I mean, it was a double overtime, little crunch time victory, which I don't think we've seen this Mavericks team in a double overtime game yet this season.
Exactly. And it was nice for the Mavericks to be able to go neck and neck amidst all those overtimes, all their starters having to play heavy minutes, especially, with Josh Green still out, with Dorian Finney-Smith, with Maxey still out. Josh Green may return on Saturday, which is intriguing. So we're going to continue to monitor his progress. He progressed recently in scrimmages to being able to play full 5-on-5 basketball. So his return is on the horizon. I believe he was listed as questionable in this Lakers game. So could see him as soon as Saturday. That's intriguing. I think Dorian still is a little ways to go, but those guys are on the return for the Mavericks, and they're sorely needed as the Mavericks are expelling their starters heavy minutes right now with essentially no rotational depth. But nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and get into this game and this clutch overtime or double overtime victory by the Mavericks. But before we do that, here's an ad from our sponsor, Anchor. All right, Jaren. So getting into it, the Mavericks came out really hot out of the gates in that first quarter. We saw Luka very just nonchalantly being able to get to the rim. He sustained a rib injury after getting hit early on in that. Well, maybe not early on, but it was like midway towards the tail end of that first quarter. Could have even been the second quarter. My memory is kind of failing me right now. But despite that, throughout most of the first half, he was just manipulating this very weak Lakers defense in a variety of ways. Whether they, particularly in that first half, they deferred to playing drop coverage on him a lot of the time. And, as soon as one of the guys went over on the screen, Luka, he'd obviously drive and get him behind him and just kind of, use that kind of little hesitation and little slow, nonchalant little waltz that he does when he gets a guy behind him, where he kind of, changes his speed and his pacing up a variety of times, depending on the scenario, to where he then, defers to kicking it back out or passing it to Christian Wood or Dwight Powell in the dunker spot, or just, flipping that little floater up, or on occasion, when he's really able to fake out the defense, like we saw in one possession, he was really able to just go right to the rim and dunk it. I mean, he barely got up because anytime Luka's slightly hampered by any sort of injury, even if it's his ribs, he can't jump. I know that actually kind of does affect jumping, but it's funny because if he has a finger injury, it seems as if that just takes away all of his athleticism. But nonetheless, he was getting to the rim with relative ease in that first half, and the Lakers, but of course, they're just lack of any sort of defensive presence outside of Anthony Davis, who wasn't playing, and one of their better wing defenders, and Lonnie Walker, wasn't playing. Of course, looking at that lineup, the only real guys that are competent defenders that were getting significant minutes for them tonight were Juan Toscano Anderson and Troy Brown Jr. And, these are solid, above average defenders, of course, but they're not stopping Luka, especially when the second guy in the equation is a Thomas Bryant or a Wenyen Gabriel. Wenyen Gabriel, of course, is a guy who can be a good weak side shot blocker at times, but he still has a lot of ways to go developmentally, just in terms of honing down on his timing and honing down on his, verticality and not fouling, things of that nature. He's nowhere near a complete player in that aspect. And Luka took advantage of their naivety in those two guys in the pick and roll. Well, whenever Bryant or Gabriel were put in those drop coverage scenarios, they would not play up on Luka, even when he was able to get to the point of attack where he was able to shoot or, make a move. They seemingly kind of just fell back into the paint. And, obviously that much is a coaching thing from Darvin Ham, but they almost seemed like they were negligent to come up, and he was really just having his way with them in the first half. And, the Mavericks scored 36 in that first quarter. The Lakers only had 22. The Lakers were able to rebound to an extent in that second quarter, just basically virtue of LeBron bulldozing his way past the also very brittle Mavericks defense, who, of course, outside of Reggie Bullock, was essentially is subjected to having no real wing defenders on the floor. Russell Westbrook started getting hot at points, and the Mavericks defense was just very was seemingly just really lazy from the top down, starting with Luka, who after that rib injury was like noticeably hampered. And, I get he was hurt a little bit, but it was just a complete non-effort on his part defensively, letting, in those Westbrook matchups, despite him having to play back, the Mavericks deferred to playing back on Russell Westbrook and conceding the jump shot to him, which, played to their benefit quite a bit, but they played back to a degree that they were still letting him blow past them despite them playing back, and like they weren't even bringing help defense or anything. And that's how the Lakers were kind of able to get back in the game there in that second quarter, where they scored 26 and the Mavericks only scored 23. Basically just virtue of Westbrook attacking Doncic, or whoever for that matter, when he really started to get cooking, and LeBron tapping into his bag and, affecting the game at all three levels by getting to the rim and trying to facilitate. And, obviously he doesn't have the same ripple effects that Luka has, just because the Lakers are so hard pressed to be able to make any sort of shots. But, LeBron was doing a good job getting into the lane and getting it to Thomas Bryant in the short roll or Gabriel in the dunker spot for, they had 11 and 14 points respectively. So the Lakers were able to get back into the game a little there in that second quarter, and the Mavericks were hard pressed to really be able to counter in terms of their offense. When Luka got hurt, it just seemed like everything kind of stagnated out for a little bit there, and their defense was basically a shell of what it was was previously in the season, as we've seen from this team really over this last 10 to 15 game stretch, where there are periods where if they have one bad defensive possession, a whole stretch of bad defense basically ensues. And that's seemingly what happened in that second quarter there. What did you think of the first half? Just the Mavericks, scorching hot start where Luka was basically getting whatever he wanted, and then their downwind in that second quarter, where they were conceding a lot of open layups or layups with little resistance to the Lakers.
Yeah, I mean the Mavericks, in that first quarter, they did a really good job of basically everything that you said. Luka was really firing on attacking the paint. That back line is just so depleted for the Lakers, and Luka was seemingly able just to, get in there with ease. There was really nothing that anything could do that the Lakers could do with stopping it. Whether it was Juan Toscano Anderson, who might be like their best defender in that starting five, Max Christie or Wenyen Gabriel, nobody could really, just put a hand up in front of Luka's face, and he was able to, I think he had like 13 or 14 first quarter points. It wasn't until Luka had that rib injury that it kind of just seemed like the whole Mavericks team fell apart, defensively and offensively. And that's whenever the Lakers were starting to get back in this game. But yeah, just defensively, the Lakers, it was really LeBron James bully ball at the point of attack. But even still, whenever they were playing drop coverage on Westbrook, or pretty much the whole team for that matter, they were easily just able to blow past the Mavericks, get an easy two. And we even saw at times wide open threes. And I know this Los Angeles Lakers team isn't very good at shooting 3-pointers. But even still, it's an NBA team. I feel like you have to at least give a little effort whenever closing out on a 3-point shot. And there was multiple times that we just didn't even see any effort. Guys were just walking out to Westbrook or whoever it was. I want to say Westbrook went like 3 for 6 from 3 in this matchup. 3 for 6. Yeah, 3 for 6 from 3 in this matchup. And for a guy that's, shooting a pretty low, I think he's in the 20s in terms of 3-point percentage this season. That's just unacceptable. But nonetheless, the Mavericks did claw, or I guess the Lakers did claw their way back in this game, and in large part to, the Mavericks just playing poor defense. That first quarter, I think the Mavericks were just really preemptive at the point of attack. Offense correlates into defense for this team, and that's what happened in the first quarter. And in the second quarter, like I said, it kind of seemed like the second that Luka got hit in the ribs, the whole team just sort of fell apart. And the Lakers, even though they only scored 26 points, it was honestly a pretty easy 26 points.
No, 100%. And, strategically, you can see, of course, why the Mavericks would defer to Westbrook shooting versus attacking. Like, that does make a lot of sense. But if you're going to play that and you're going to hold a guy back, then you better make sure that, your defensive rotations in terms of the rest of the team, whoever's not manned up on Westbrook, are very crisp, and guys are out getting to shooters fast. Because, that's to an extent like one extra guy that you can throw at somebody in a rotation or send out to a shooter who catches a pass if need be, whoever's guarding up on Westbrook, because especially if you get late in the shot clock there and he doesn't have time to get the ball back or cut or anything like that. Of course, and it may not be as applicable earlier in the shot clock, but I mean, you kind of have the upside there. It's not necessarily a 5-on-4, but it's kind of like a 4.5-on-4, because of Westbrook's limitations shooting the ball. And yet the Mavericks still were very late on rotations or very lazily closing out on shooters. Outside of Christian Wood, who I thought, he played a much better defensive second half, but he played a pretty solid defensive first half in terms of, just sticking back there as a paint protector, barring, when LeBron would come downhill. There's, it's really not like anybody can stop him. But, outside of that, he was doing a really good job protecting the paint against, the Schroeders and the, Max Christie's of the world. Whenever they would drive, Wood stayed home despite Mavericks defenders getting beat off of by single dribble blow-bys and things of that nature, and did a pretty good job. But I mean, basically everybody in the starting lineup outside of him, even when Dwight Powell, who didn't start in this game, even when he was playing and, was forced to guard at the point of attack, of course, he was bad as well. Frank did a pretty decent job as per usual. Even he had a few slip-ups that were kind of uncharacteristic.
Yeah.
Hardy kind of the same way as Frank. And the Mavericks seemingly had a bad defensive game, in my opinion, for really everybody on the team tonight, really outside of Christian Wood. Tim Hardaway Jr., per usual, was getting lost a countless amount of times on rotations. Just like we say on this podcast every day, just the complete inability to close out on shooters as he's getting stuck behind down screens, and he's just not really cognizant of where he is on the floor. I think Tim's main defensive mishap is essentially his awareness. Yes, he's athletically he doesn't have the longest wingspan, and it's not like he's able to stick with a lot of these guys, but he gets lost so much of the time. And that's honestly the most annoying part. Reggie Bullock, he had actually a couple decent defensive possessions in that first half, but his defense tailored way off towards the end of the game. And we really started to see him get beat and let guys get to their spot. Spencer Dinwiddie had a pretty rough go at it defensively. He did have a nice come from behind block on LeBron at one point when he wasn't looking. But nonetheless, he too was getting blown by quite a bit. But I would say that he's probably the second best defender in this game outside of Christian Wood.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a very big state of the team statement right there. For Spencer Dinwiddie to be the second best defender in this game. But, Luka, I think this was honestly one of his more atrocious games defensively of the season, where he basically was conceding any and everything, was letting any guy shoot if they wanted to, regardless of who it was letting anybody get to the basket at will. He would almost, barely flash his hands and then kind of just let a guy blow past him. We already know about Davis. I won't even get into that because that's just, Davis Bertans. I say this knowing that I probably couldn't, but I legitimately do think I might be able to score on him once or twice in a one-on-one game of 21. If I got the opportunity to get the ball and he wasn't just raining threes on me, I despite the length, I feel like I could catch him at least once or twice just from the fact that he never even gets down to a stance. His defensive effort tonight was horrendous. Dwight Powell, he put forth as much effort as he could per usual, but still has his obvious shortcomings. And Hardy and Ntilikina didn't really get enough minutes to affect the game on that side of the ball. So the Mavericks, as we've just said throughout this stretch, the Mavericks are so limited personnel-wise. There's not really many more takeaways throughout this stretch in terms of how the Mavericks are playing defensively, other than they don't have the personnel to be able to stick with these teams, especially in a game where every single starter played 47 minutes or longer. These guys are obviously going to get tired and winded. The fact that Christian Wood hasn't had as impressive of a game as he did was wildly, commendable in itself. And, something that I obviously, amidst the shortcomings of the Lakers big men and their whole situation over there with Anthony Davis injured, you definitely kind of projected that Christian Wood might have a sort of not coming out game because he's been playing well recently, but you definitely expected him to come and establish his presence on the inside in this game. He did so on both sides of the ball. But outside of that, the Mavericks seemingly were conceding Russell Westbrook and LeBron James drives almost all game, and that definitely hurt them, especially as the Lakers continued to win both the third and fourth quarter. And the Mavericks slowly saw their lead, or their 14-point lead that they ended the first quarter with, fade away to the point where the game was tied after the fourth quarter. And, I think to an extent, like, that's the story of the game. If we're sort of condensing it, of course, we're going to get more into how everybody played offensively in this game once we sort of recircle back to, how everybody played individually, of course. But like the Mavericks, basically relying and having to ride on the coattails of Christian Wood for all of their defensive shortcomings was what led to this game going to overtime and then subsequently double overtime. Nonetheless, though, the Mavericks obviously were able to clutch up at the end of regulation and overtime, despite looking at many periods of time in this game like they were going to really blow it and drop this game. How are the Mavericks able? Let's start with the end of the fourth quarter, Jaren. How are the Mavericks able to clutch up at the end of the fourth quarter? Talk about Luka's step back three, and just give us kind of a breakdown, just in terms of those possessions leading up to the that last minute of the fourth quarter that the Mavericks were able to push the game into overtime.
Yeah, I mean, the Mavericks, in all fairness, I'm not gonna lie, like that's the kind of game that the Mavericks would lose. Being down 3 with like 2 minutes left, that's sort of the game, where the Mavericks just sort of tap out and let the Lakers run away with this one. But needless to say, that they clawed back into the game, and I mean, in large part, it was kind of just stupid shots taken by the Lakers, but the defense, sort of came alive, and solely due to pretty much just Christian Wood. He was able to lock down the paint. Of course, I think like majority of his 5 blocks came within like the final 2 minutes of the game. But he was able to lock down the paint whenever the Lakers, pretty much all of their offense came via drives, whether it's LeBron or Russell Westbrook. So, they had to defer the 3-point line. And I know Troy Brown Jr. hit a shot, or maybe 2. Westbrook got a shot. But other than that, what was it?
Kendrick Nunn made a few in that fourth quarter. I don't know.
Kendrick Nunn made a few. We even saw Wenyen Gabriel through, which I'm totally okay with. I'll let him shoot that.
I think that was in overtime, I believe.
Was it in overtime? I don't.
It was either in overtime at the end of the fourth quarter where LeBron bounced it back out to that weak side corner, and he took 2 threes in this game. I didn't even know he had that shot in his repertoire, admittedly, and made one of them. So more power to him. I thought he played as good of a game as he could have.
No, he really did. But yeah, I mean, I just think the Lakers sort of settled as the 2 minutes ticked on by. But the Mavericks offensively, I mean, they were just able to not get in their bag, but Luka was able to get in his bag. I think I'm not sure what he was at before like clutch time in the fourth quarter, but he was able to just hone in and become Luka Doncic again. And he was able to hit step back 3 after step back 3. That's usually a shot that Luka settles for, but this was one where he was sort of attacking the 3-point line, knowing that, he was shooting at such a good clip the last few days. And all power to him. I mean, he was able to hit them. Just knowing what I've seen out of Luka this season, he's not shot the best clip from 3 through at least the clutch, and he was able to knock down like 2 really clutch shots, one in overtime and then one to send the game into overtime with like 6 seconds left on the clock. But yeah, I mean, it was honestly, he just did it with ease. He didn't even look like he was trying. And I mean, that's sort of what his step back repertoire is whenever he's settling, he goes to it, and all power to him because he can make it. But yeah, I mean, the Mavericks, whether it was, Christian Wood inside the paint, I know Dwight Powell in the dunker spot a few times, they were just able to get some clutch baskets. Christian Wood and Luka were able to connect on the pick and roll quite a bit in that end of that fourth quarter, where Christian Wood like caught a crazy lob pass. It seemed like it was like 3 feet away from the basket, and he just somehow put it in. And that's the Christian Wood effect. He can just pretty much catch anything, anywhere. Tim, I want to say he had a clutch 3 in that fourth quarter scenario. And then Spencer, I mean, in large part, he kind of turned on during the overtime period. But Spencer, started actually playing aggressive. And this is something that we've not seen the past few weeks. He had a stupid 3, but I think it was in the third quarter where he just got the ball with like a late shot clock scenario and then did a step back 3 in the very like corner of like the whole entire court, and somehow got up and went in. But the Mavericks, they just did a good job of I guess dictating inside and letting Luka Doncic be Luka.
No, 100%. And I mean, the Mavericks offense definitely increased in production in the latter half of that fourth quarter and in overtime. Hence why they were able to ride the pine to a victory there. I definitely wanted to recycle to that offense, like we had mentioned, and talk about there was a couple possessions there because the Lakers continually blitzed the Mavericks after in the first half. They obviously conceded and, kind of let Luka drive and play drop coverage. They were very adamant upon trying to get the ball out of his hands, to which he made the right read almost every time. I mean, they just don't have a lot of defensive versatility to be able to throw out there to guard him, whether they go to whatever strategy. I mean, Luka was able to figure it out fairly easily just because of the Lakers' lack of perimeter defense. But he was able to hit Christian Wood in the short roll, particularly like two possessions there in the fourth quarter that were really key, where Christian Wood then was able to dump it off to Dwight Powell in the dunker spot for two easy layups. Those were two of the most important plays in the game in terms of regenerating some momentum for the Mavericks as the lead was slipping heavily. The Lakers were able to get up by as many as, I believe, 6 in that fourth quarter, around like 3 or 4 minutes left. And then the game definitely kind of stagnated. I was reading that in the complete opposite. The Lakers were, they only got up by 2 at one point, but it was a very like one of those sort of like slow killer D-wines. I don't know why I thought that they had that big of a lead, but I was reading the play-by-play here and it said 95-89, but I totally missed that the Mavericks had 95. But nonetheless, it definitely at times felt like they had like a lead of 6 because the momentum fully swung in their direction towards the end of that game, where they kind of just kept taking bites at the apple in the Mavericks offense. While they hit it, the process had been relatively good throughout that third quarter. The Mavericks didn't look terrible. Even in that second quarter, I mean, most of that fourth quarter, the Mavericks looked very bleak in terms of their offensive production towards the very end. And the Lakers, like I said, just kept taking, little bites at the apple. LeBron James got a tip-in layup at the 3:27 mark of the fourth quarter that made the game 95-91. Then the Mavericks let Russell Westbrook shoot a 3 on the ensuing possession right after that, after a Dwight Powell, or after the Mavericks had a shot clock turnover. So I think that was the Dinwiddie possession that you referenced, where he got the ball in the corner and essentially had nothing to do with very little time and took a terrible 3. So then, Westbrook makes a 3, which the Mavericks completely conceded to him. Then right after that, Luka has a pass to Dwight Powell with about 2 minutes and 16 seconds left. That was one of the most insane passes I was watching. I don't know if it was just because of the vantage point. Maybe it wasn't as cool as it seemed, but I mean, it was amidst like a conglomerate of 3 yellow jerseys. I think the Lakers were wearing yellow right last night.
They were.
Yeah. In the paint, of course. And Luka just seemingly floats it up in the perfect spots where it goes past all these arms and leads Dwight Powell to a wide open layup. And the Mavericks at that point are up 3. Then out of nowhere, just complete ultimate basically of course this happens to the Mavericks type deal. I don't know how else to describe it without using curse words, but the LeBron is able to get inside the paint, and as he always does, even knowing that he has nobody on this roster that can shoot, just due to the fact that he essentially has no other options, and this is how he's played stylistically his whole career. Dishes it out to Wenyen Gabriel in the corner, and out of all people, nails a 3. It's a tie game. Then the ensuing possession, Tim Hardaway Jr. gets called for an offensive foul. I do want to make a point of the refereeing in this game after I get to the, the whole overtime deal as we wrap up this summation of the fourth quarter real quick. But after that, Dennis Schroeder is able to get to the rim for a layup with 1 minute and 31 seconds left, just little to no resistance. Then Christian Wood's able to get to the line, and he makes 1 out of 2. The Mavericks are down by 1 at this point. The whole late game scenario, to an extent, was a blur, like to a little extent, because I was very locked in. I started more so looking at it from a fan perspective. I'm like, oh, are the Mavericks actually going to blow this, versus really tapping into the analytical side of it. But nonetheless, rehashing this, it definitely shows how much the Mavericks were just collapsing. versus like when I was watching the game in real time, it almost seemed as if like, oh, they're just kind of having some unlucky plays here. But even just reading like the play-by-play here, like it definitely rubs you the wrong way in terms of how the Mavericks are just unable to close out games. But of course, we'll get into why Luka Doncic, the Mavericks did a much better job in overtime and double overtime, of course, but we'll get into like why Luka Doncic was the saving grace late in these games and why the Mavericks actually pulled through with the clutch time victory here. But amidst a flurry of substitutions, the Mavericks end up fouling Russell Westbrook with about 11.1 seconds left after Tim Hardaway Jr. misses a three to try and go ahead in the game. The Lakers took a lot of time off the clock. There's a big review. They're trying to figure out who is shooting the free throws between, I believe it was Russell Westbrook and Schroeder. Yeah, I thought it was Schroeder. I just want to confirm. But Jason Kidd, out of all people, challenges, and the decision is essentially that even though the replay supports the call that was initially called in terms of there being a foul, because Jason Kidd could only challenge a foul, they still are required to review who the foul was on, and hence Russell Westbrook was actually the one who was fouled. Nonetheless, it ends up not mattering because he makes both free throws. Mavericks call a timeout. They're down 3 with 11.1 seconds left. It's their last timeout. And in typical Luka Doncic fashion, for the first time this year, amidst him missing a lot of these step backs, hit 2 of them tonight. But he comes in. Lakers don't choose to exercise their take foul or anything like that. Or even if they didn't have a take foul, they decided not to foul at 3. And I think Wenyen Gabriel is guarding Luka, if I recall. It may have been Troy Brown Jr. I can't remember.
I think it was Troy Brown.
Yeah. Luka, he doesn't even really do the step back with the between the legs. I mean, he just gives us kind of a hard jab and then steps back and drains it with 6 seconds left. Great moment. Mavericks are, got a tie ball game here. The Lakers end up finding Troy Brown Jr. for a 3-pointer that was very controversial in nature. It was off a LeBron pass, and Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to close out on the wing. In real time, me and Jaren were watching this game together, and Jaren was like very ecstatic. He's like, "Oh wow, like Tim Hardaway Jr. just stepped up and made the best defensive play of his life." We thought he had blocked Troy Brown Jr. and the Mavericks, had like a very decisive, great last 2 possessions to close out to this game. And even in like after the fact, after we even like saw the replays, we're like, yeah, like Tim fouled him, but it was still a great defensive play. But now like looking at the replay, like a day forward and everything, I think it's like pretty clear that it was a very blatant miscall.
It was a very miscall, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. And so the Mavericks definitely kind of were able to survive a very sort of teeter-totting decision there by the referees who just decided to not blow the whistle and held their water for whatever reason. And the game luckily goes to overtime. Jaren, this was a very up and down game, of course, and there was a lot of bad refereeing. First of all, me and you are both not ones to blame the refs for any games unless there is seriously just some peak NBA like fixing antics or something of that nature happening. I don't know if that was the case in this game. I just thought it was a very, it seemed like it was a new crew. I could just be speaking. I don't know for sure if they were, but I hadn't really seen those guys before. And they just in terms of both sides of the ball, it wasn't very one-sided. It was very wishy-washy in terms of how they refereed the Mavericks and the Lakers. They were very adamant upon like certain things in terms of calling travels and carries and things like that, but were very free flowing in terms of letting a ton of fouls go and let a lot of things slide. And they definitely had their mishaps and shortcomings in this game. What did you come to surmise out of the Lakers refereeing? I mean, or just the refereeing in general in this game, and how are the Mavericks able to survive it amidst sort of the luck that they got late in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is safe to say that on both sides of the ball, it was definitely not the best of, showcase by the referees. There was a few missed calls on the Mavericks side, a lot of missed calls on the Lakers side. Of course, that Troy Brown Jr. foul or it should have been a foul on Tim Hardaway. That one definitely sticks out the most, but just throughout the whole game. But I mean, nonetheless, the Mavericks were able to get lucky on a few foul calls and same with the Lakers. At the end of the day, I felt like it wasn't called fairly, of course, but in terms of, foul calls being on both squads, it was stupid foul in the Mavericks and stupid foul in the Lakers. So in that sense, I think it was a fair game. But yeah, it was definitely, wishy-washy and very non-consistent in what they called, and which is really just unfortunate. But needless to say, I had never seen that officiating crew again, or I had never seen that officiating crew before. And I mean, to be on a TNT game in Los Angeles, I mean, that's a pretty big stage. I don't know why they put, to me, they looked like a new crew. They definitely acted like a new crew. So I don't know why that was the case, but I mean, nonetheless, it just kind of seemed like as overtime ticked on by and as the fourth quarter ticked on by, this was one where the refs were just like they just refused to blow the whistle, and it got really physical between Westbrook and Luka, and which resulted in Westbrook getting a flagrant one. And to me, that is a pretty obvious flagrant one, because he was trying to get skinny for the screen. But I mean, it was pretty stupid. He just like bulldozed into Luka twice. One of them was on a like rebound play in which, I mean, Westbrook, I don't know if he tripped or what, but he just ran into the back of Luka whenever the ball was being taken out. And I mean, it was super late after the play, and it just kind of looked a little dirty to me. But I think, looking back at it, it wasn't as quick as I thought it was. So it actually like didn't really look too bad. But needless to say, they definitely didn't blow the whistle. And like I said before, I think it was fairly called on both sides, but it was just a bad refereed game in my opinion.
No, 100%. It was definitely very fluctuating in terms of what was being called and what wasn't. To your point about that overtime period, obviously it got very physical when you talk about Westbrook ramming into Luka twice. One of those, under the basket. One of those when Luka was bringing the ball up the court, and they almost seemed to get into an argument. But they're both Jordan Brand guys. For whatever reason, the situation was quickly reconciled, and Westbrook went and dapped up Luka. They almost seemed like they were about to get into like a big fight. Like they seemed heated, and then every tension just completely stopped all of a sudden. I don't know what was said exactly, but good that Luka didn't pick up a tech is my main summation of that scenario. Jason Kidd came in running in like Jason Kidd, me and Jaren kind of have an ongoing joke with his new glasses. He kind of looks like this one guy. If you guys have seen the show MasterChef, he looks like, what's the guy's name? I got to search it up.
I don't know the chef's name, but I know exactly
who I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Graham Elliott.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And the guy, and he just came, and Jason Kidd, he's not a terribly big guy, but he's definitely gained some weight in his post-playing career days, and he just looked like really funny, like waddling out there. Looked like Graham Elliott running for Luka, holding him back amidst Westbrook, but he was able to secure him, and everybody held. Reggie stepped up, Tim stepped up, so that always solid to see everybody vouching and really vying for their superstar player and Luka. You would hope that they do that amidst how much he carries them. That used to be something that we were like very adamant about. That was like what we loved about this team. But amidst Luka being on this team for so many years, like that's expected now for those guys to step up and do that when your superstar gets in a scenario like that. So more power to them. Glad that they're able to quickly remediate that situation. But obviously a very physical and rough overtime. But amidst both overtime periods, the Mavericks were able to outscore the Lakers 18-14. The offense definitely seemed like it had some new life brought into it. Christian Wood really furthered his defensive abilities in those overtime periods where he had done a solid job protecting the rim up until that point in the game, but he almost tapped into a new level in those overtime periods. So, I want to get into that and just how the Mavericks offense was able to get out of, that dead water that it was in the fourth quarter and, was able to catalyze, and possession after possession, they were actually able to generate, a semblance of shot making and a good pick and roll game. How were the Mavericks able to do that in that overtime period? How did the offense get going, Jaren?
Yeah, so the Mavericks, they were able to, really just dictate at the point of attack in that overtime period. I don't really know if it was, the Lakers being tired or what, but kind of, just outside of the gates in that at least first overtime period, both teams, it was a struggle to score. But the Mavericks, their main source of offense was either Spencer Dinwiddie actually being assertive and attacking. He got an amazing poster on like two players. I think it was Troy Brown and Wenyen Gabriel. And I mean, that was like, we hadn't seen that in a long time, probably since that Milwaukee game. And it was really just nice to see him actually assertive. He did it one more time, but that was in the second overtime period. But other than that, we saw the Spencer Dinwiddie takes. We also got to see Christian Wood just work his power down low, whether it was with the pick and roll. I know a few times he was just giving the down low, and he had like a little fadeaway sort of like jump hook.
He was giving the business to Bryant and Gabriel at times, despite them being very comparable in size to them. Gabriel being like actually decent defender. I mean, he was just taking them into the post and, whether it was fading over the top or being able to get a little hook over them, and just dominating from that standpoint. I mean, something that, we see him try to exercise against some of these, both of those guys aren't necessarily like, pure 7-footers. Anytime Christian Wood gets matched up on a center that, is comparable to his size, he does a great job taking advantage of that stuff. We only see the problems in terms of him being able to post up and seal guys when he's going against the Valanciunases, the Steven Adams, any of those, big, giants, Embiid, Jokic. He's going to bear some problems there just from a size perspective and strength perspective. But against a guy like Gabriel, like Christian Wood, he's offensively skilled enough to be able to take a guy like that into the post and finish over him.
No, for sure. And that's exactly what Christian Wood did. I mean, that's, outside of the pick and roll, like that's what is the bulk of his offense. I'm not even sure if I think he may have hit a three. He hit 2 threes this game. But we really didn't see them after the second half.
They were like, like pick and pops with Luka as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Yeah, but in that overtime period, Luka was getting some work down low. I think it was like a minute 17 or it was like a few seconds. It was like 40 seconds or 30 seconds left. I don't know if you want to look up the time on that. Yeah, but he hit that like very timely step back three that tied the ball game back up to like I'm not sure what the score was at that point, but it timed the ball game back up, and basically after that it went into double overtime, and the Mavericks just seemingly pulled away with the game. In that second overtime period, it was like pretty much all Luka Doncic. I know Spencer Dinwiddie, he had a bucket or two where, again, being aggressive, he had like a layup, and then one where he put it over Wenyen Gabriel's head again. But other than that, it was really just Luka Doncic dictating the point of attack, getting down low, and just being, how assertive he is on the inside the post, really what he was able to do in that second overtime period.
Yeah, I mean, in scenarios where Luka's getting doubled, this has been something that I've been very adamant that I've wanted Spencer to do more so. Something that he did very well and glowingly in these 2 overtime periods, right? Where when Luka's getting doubled and, the Mavericks have to either consolidate and opt for the short roll and then try to make decisions out of that, whether that's, Christian Wood at that point or Josh Green when he's healthy, then trying to find somebody in the dunker spot, or then rotating over to try to find a shooter, or, just passing it on the wing to a wide open guy, things of that nature. But sometimes they're not able to find that guy in the short roll. Sometimes, whoever is able to, whether it's like whatever big is playing, maybe the Lakers double with one of their wings or their guards, and that big is able to kind of stay back on Christian Wood. And it's just a lot harder of an entry pass for Luka to make. Sometimes Luka will get it to Spencer. And at that point, Spencer can, basically the ball is in his court at that point, figuratively speaking, of course. Like he kind of dictates the offense at that point because, the shot clock's got to a certain, time where he has to make a decision. And, we see time and time again, a lot of this time, even in games, where Luka isn't getting hard doubled or hard trapped, or, he's not necessarily getting like blitzed. It's, the defense will collapse on him and he's going to get doubled, once he starts driving regardless, even if it's not necessarily a blitz, quote unquote. And we see a lot of the time, like Spencer, when he's attacking off some of these closeouts, he has a tendency to, I haven't really seen him go as full force and like full effect as much, right? He's getting to the rim, yes, but then he, is posting up, which is very effective against smaller guards. Spencer being like 6'6", he does a great job posting up against smaller guards. It's one of my favorite attributes about him. But even when he's going against some of these, bigger wings who are still light-footed and able to stay with him, great defenders, things of that nature, Spencer's been having a tendency to still kind of like not I get trying to pace it and slow down at points, especially, you don't want to get your shot blocked, things of that nature. But there are some times over the last 10 to 15 games when I think Spencer just needs to go, and he's deferring to trying to post up and then either passing out of that or, making the shot a little bit tougher than it could be, versus when, even if he does get blocked, I don't know, he has a chance to get fouled, things of that nature. We saw him being a little more aggressive in terms of plays like this early in the season. I don't know. This could just be maybe some sort of weird, keen observation I'm having that may not be true for all of you guys watching as well on the screen, but me and Jaren talked about it as much last night. And I thought what was really good about Dinwiddie's game in this one, of course, I'm not, obviously the Lakers don't have some sort of all-star cast in terms of being able to close out. And, they obviously have a pretty lackluster rotational defense, especially when they're, throwing their best, like 2 point of attack defenders, either, probably bringing up Gabriel or, Troy Brown Jr. In a double team on Luka, to where he's just seeing all the limbs, that basically relegates all their rim protection and their perimeter defense that is actually capable and competent. That relegates it out to the 3-point line. So I'm not saying Dinwiddie was facing like a plethora of resistance when he was doing these drives, but he did a great job of being much more assertive and attacking the rim very hard. And I think that was a big sticking point for the Mavericks in terms of how they finished those overtime periods, whether he was, attacking the rim hard, and even if the Lakers defense was rotating over, he was able to dish it back out, and the Mavericks offense was able to reset with Luka in a much more, applicable scenario where things weren't as clustered together, and, it may have been too late in the shot clock for the Lakers to really send a hard trap at that point. So I think that was very key, and it's something I'd like to see Spencer do more going forward, just in terms of how assertive he was attacking with, not a thought in his mind of slowing down. And I'm not saying that I want that from every possession, of course, like he still needs to pace himself and stuff, but, just going at it. Those 2 dunks that he had in those overtime periods were emblematic of a guy who was just letting the canister loose. And those were some of my 2 favorite possessions in the game. Like we said, to point to how the Mavericks finished in overtime, to be able to send that game to double overtime, of course. If we want to fast forward just to after that Spencer possession that I just alluded to amidst that kind of elongated discussion, Spencer gets that dunk, right on top of Wenyen Gabriel's head. Wenyen Gabriel then comes back in vengeance with a pick and roll with LeBron and makes a little sort of floater, ties the game back up. It's 105 all with 146 left. It was actually an and one, and Wenyen Gabriel actually was fouled by Dinwiddie, ironically, and made the free throw. So then the Lakers have the lead. They're up 106-105 with 1 minute 45 seconds left. Tim Hardaway Jr. misses a 3. Mavericks are still down by 1. When they end up fouling LeBron, he makes 2 out of 2 free throws. Lakers are up by 3. And then with 47.1 seconds left, Luka drains another step back jump shot, ties the game up. Luka is tapping into being a penultimate clutch guy at this stage in the season. Obviously he's always been that guy, but he's been able to step up in a game like this after admittedly having kind of a rough go at it in terms of some of these clutch looks he's been taking. He's been asked to take a vast majority of the Mavericks clutch shots, been asked to carry that burden almost completely. It's almost like the Mavericks don't even draw up plays, and if there's a make or break shot that they have to have, it's just basically go to Luka and hope for the best. He's had a few close calls. He's had a few really bad misses. Just talk about how important this is for Doncic to be able to, have the confidence going forward. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't like particularly rattled, but just talk about how important it is real quickly, Jaren, for him to be able to step up in the clutch like this after, having some clutch time woes, admittedly, just in terms of the last second shots he was taking earlier this season.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you look back at this game, I mean, he got pretty banged up. He got hit in the ribs. And that clearly took a huge toll on him for about 2 quarters, I think, until really the 4th quarter is whenever he really recovered. But, needless to say, I mean, just for a guy to go in there, if we got the ball with like 11 seconds left, this is to send the game into overtime with like 11 seconds left. He just drives down the court and, I mean, in 5 seconds, just totals out and makes a step back 3 casually, and didn't even really celebrate too hard. But, for a guy that 3-pointer wise has not had his best clutch time moments this season, to just really have 2 in one game is really just indicative of, who he is. what he's been able to do this season. And especially, throughout this game, he's been banged up. Like I said and mentioned before, he just went in there and did it. I mean, I don't even think it was really much of him settling for a 3-point shot. It was just that's his confidence level.
Yeah. So, and then at the end of that overtime period, Christian Wood has a huge block on LeBron to be able to, honestly, like that was basically probably the best sort of stretch of the game for the Mavericks where Luka makes that three. LeBron comes down the court and misses the three. Reggie gets the rebound. Then Tim misses the three. LeBron gets the rebound. And then I want you to talk about how key Christian Wood's block was, what exactly went down there, and how the Mavericks were able to subsequently get the game to a second overtime.
Yeah. So, but I forget what it was, but the Lakers had like a 5 seconds to play with. They inbound it to LeBron, and LeBron, one-on-one, I forget who was defending him initially. I think it was like Tim or maybe Reggie was the initial defender on him. And he just seemingly blows past them. And Christian Wood, he tries to do a reverse layup or at least get in the paint and bully ball.
And LeBron could have easily went up for a dunk, right on the baseline.
He could have, yeah.
So, yeah.
He very well could have. I think there was a help side defender. I think the Reggie help side defended and came up a little bit, and that's what forced him to sort of rely on a reverse layup.
But yeah, it almost looked like it's still Reggie didn't come up enough if he really wanted to just
if LeBron really wanted to, I think he could have dunked over Reggie. But needless to say, I think the Mavericks got a little lucky, but Christian Wood was all skill in the way that he was able to. It was a clean block. This one was definitely clean on LeBron, and I mean that was what sent it to double overtime. I know LeBron was flailing and asking for a foul, and saying he hit my wrist and everything. But if you look back at replay, it was all ball. That's the one no call that they got correct.
Yes, and I mean that possession was one of the more wildly impressive possessions in this game, because there was obviously the stretch earlier where was it in overtime where Christian Wood had the 2 blocks
on Westbrook?
On Westbrook.
I think one was in regulation and then one was in overtime. They may have both been in overtime, but
okay. Because I'm just having sort of a hard time recounting. Okay, no. It was in double overtime where Christian Wood blocks Westbrook's, where he blocked his layup. But the one where I was, I guess, alluding to the possession where Christian Wood had the 2 blocks on Westbrook, or not Westbrook, but he blocked LeBron from behind, and right before that he got a block. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I believe that was at the end of the fourth quarter. So I mean, needless to say, obviously we're having some trouble recounting this precisely. As
that's called being a fan in the last 10 minutes of game. So
yeah, just due to the fact that this game was late last night, yesterday, but just Christian Wood having 5 blocks, all of them subsequently, at least 4 of them to my recollection. One of the one possession where he got 2 blocks in a row. One I think where he caught LeBron from behind. I mean, and he blocked his shot in overtime, of course, send it to double OT. Is expected, of course, that he stepped up against a very lackluster Lakers team that was losing out on a lot of bigs. But I mean, for him to do it to this degree truly shows his improvement as a guy who's able to switch on to, some 3s and 4s and those sort of smaller type guys, and a guy who, when needed to, can rim protect in spurts. I mean, this is not something that he can be relied upon, because we all obviously saw after that key Westbrook block there at the end of double overtime, Christian Wood he got up a little shakily after one of those, and he rolled his ankle. I mean, he's I don't want to call him brittle, but he's a lot more frail compared to, of course, a lot of these centers out there, and he just doesn't have the strength to continually hold up as your primary rim protector. But the fact that he's proving that he can do it in spurts and using his length to his advantage, I think is what I'm most impressed about, because when the Mavericks do ever get some real rim protection next to him, or when Maxey gets back, even if that's just the only sort of solution that they're going to have to that, it's going to serve him a lot well that he's really bought into the defensive scheme, and he's defending at such a high level just in terms of his rim protection and when he's getting switched on to smaller offensive players.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is the second or maybe even third 5+ block game that he's had this season. And I mean, just to be able to step up whenever, of course, JaVale McGee, who's our quote unquote rim protector, is just such a bad basketball player. And then, our only rim protector, Maxey Kleber, is out for almost the season. For him to really just step up, embrace this role, and, not be known as a, shot blocker or a rim protector and just really like embrace the role. And, I'm not saying he is a rim protector by any means, but he's really done an amazing job of like being that sort of substitute to whatever you want to call him right now. But I mean, all props to him. This was a very good showcase of him just, coming in there and filling a role that we need.
No, 100%. And definitely carried over into the double overtime period. We already referenced his block on Westbrook, but he had some key rebounds in that period where he got an offensive tip in. Luka did a good job attacking. Spencer did a good job attacking. And the Mavericks were kind of able to just run away from there because, I mean, the only points the Lakers were able to score in that double overtime period was a Westbrook three that was kind of conceded by the Mavericks, as all of his threes, I think, that he made kind of were. Troy Brown Jr. hit a mid-range jump shot. But, Spencer Dinwiddie, the Christian Wood, and Luka Doncic effect was just too much. And then the Mavericks basically got to play the free throw game, and they were able to run away with it. And the game was actually 119 to 115. So I said at the top of the podcast, it was 118 to 115, but I stand corrected there, of course. But nonetheless, the Mavericks were able to come away with a great clutch time victory. Just in terms of we already highlighted the importance of this game, just for the Mavericks to be able to win a game where they were clearly just out of sorts on both sides of the ball throughout stretches within that second and third quarter. Obviously, very wildly important and huge in terms of winning this ball game. But there were some shortcomings, as we obviously alluded to, and let's kind of go player by player here. And just really quickly, we've already talked about a lot of these guys in the starting lineup. Of course, like, you don't want your starters to have to play 47 minutes. That's obviously a huge amount of time because every guy in our starting lineup played 47 minutes or longer. So obviously that was something that the Mavericks would prefer to kind of serve without Jason Kidd having to do that. But amidst the short rotation, the Mavericks are sorely needing Finney Smith and Josh Green to get back. Just a couple more games, I guess. I mean, you hate to see the Mavericks expel this much energy into their starters. Who knows what kind of happens against Portland on Saturday, but you'd hope that maybe they could defer to some of their role players. But in a game where the Mavericks aren't able to take care of business, this is typically the resultant where they have to kind of overexpel some of their role players. So obviously we talked a lot about Luka Doncic, Spencer Dinwiddie. We didn't really talk too much about Tim Hardaway Jr., but he had a decent shooting game, was doing really good attacking and running out in transition. He went 3 for 11 from 3. Obviously was his typical saloon door self on defense. But, I mean, he had an okay shooting game, did a good job attacking. I thought he was, actually being a capable offensive player despite having, very up and down game shooting the three. He was able to get to the rim and, pull up in that mid-range area when the Lakers kind of conceded, to going under on the screen or chasing him over. And, Tim has his little dribble package where he's able to get into his mid-range jump shots, and he made a few jump shots from that. So it's nice to see a game where he's able to score 20 points or more. He had 22 in this game where he wasn't just bombing from 3. But, it's still, all of what he did positively in this game was, virtue of his offensive production. And, we already talked a lot, I think, about Christian Wood and Spencer and Luka. So we don't really need to harp too much on them. Reggie, another rough showing in this game. Jaren, what did you take from his performance? He made a couple threes and he got a lot of rebounds, as did Tim. Reggie had 9 and Tim had 8 respectively, but you can kind of attribute that to the game going so long and there being so many missed shots in an overtime game like this. What did you have to make of Reggie's game? Another game where he's, he had a couple of good defensive possessions in there in the first half, but you definitely saw how he tailored off being the only wing out there, how he, just kind of got dead legged at points. Another sort of up and down defensive game from him. Another very, I'm not bad is the word, but just very offensive game where he makes a few mediocre. Yeah. It just doesn't do much else than that. What did you have to make of that specifically?
Yeah. So, what Reggie was able to do, I definitely, in, mediocre words, he didn't have the best offensive production. He was able to knock down a few threes. His complimentary one, his first shot made kind of 3 that he always does. And then I think he was able to make one shortly after that. But after that, offensively, like after the first quarter, it just kind of disappeared. He went 2 for 8 from the 3-point line and 2 for 8 from the field. He was able to get a foul where he went 1 of 2 from the line. I want to say that was in like the third or second quarter, whenever it was like a foul streak that happened, and Reggie was able to get on the line. And of course, went 1 of 2. He finished with 7 points in this game and like 9 rebounds. So yeah, I mean, he was able to be like really active on the glass, but any game where you're playing the Lakers, they're not the best shooting team. I mean, you kind of have to expect a guy that's playing 47 minutes, he better have over like 5 boards, especially in Reggie, where we've seen him put up a lot of 0 stat lines across the board. So needless to say, he was at least able to produce, on the rebounding category. I think this was probably his highest rebounding game this season. But nonetheless, I just didn't, I mean, it was definitely indicative of Reggie Bullock's season, where he's able to, have like one quote unquote hot quarter and then just sort of disappear after that. And even his defense, it was sort of mediocre. He had his glimpses here and there of, solid defense, but shortly, it was short-lived to say the least. And I mean, to be honest, I wasn't all too impressed with, with 47 minutes of production. I just wasn't really impressed.
No, yeah, I saw some people on Twitter denoted him the nickname Cardio B just now because he's just out there getting cardio. So I thought that was very funny. I thought that was about it's about a peak NBA tomfoolery as it gets right there. Once again, Davis Bertans came off in 7 minutes off the bench and was a complete albatross of a player in general. Gave no defense and attempted 1 3 that he missed and turned the ball over and had a plus minus of -8, but it probably should have been -45 just in terms of the eye test. I mean, he concedes almost. I mean, he can't play defense really at any level, whether it's letting a guy catch a ball and off a backdoor cut, trying to rotate with a perimeter shooter, trying to play man up on a guy. I mean, just all facets of defense. He just can't stay with anybody. I mean, he plays defense like he kind of has his like hands by his wayside. I mean, I know Davis, like, sure, he isn't the most insanely athletic guy on the planet, but I mean, he runs fast he looks like a big giant red deer out there sometimes. And he's, 6'10". He's kind of fast. He'd be running around those screens really fast, gets out in transition sometimes. You'd think that he could serve to, at least get down to, and I know he's not the strongest guy, but he could serve to get his hands down to defensive stance and at least provide like a little bit of resistance at times, just in terms of his size and his foot speed. But, that was nowhere to be found. Dwight Powell benefited off those, a couple possessions with Luka and Christian Wood in the short roll. Had a solid game in terms of providing some minutes and filling in the gap in that double overtime period when Christian Wood was kind of hampered by the injury at the tail end there and throughout the course of the game. Just provide some solid minutes, 6 points, 4 rebounds. Good game from him. Frank had some solid minutes. Honestly, would have liked to see more from him in this game because he got off to like a little hot start. He made a 3 and then had a nice little backdoor cut where he got a layup. And I honestly think he could have served to get some more minutes in this game because he was playing some really good point of attack defense in a game where the Mavericks could have used maybe, I know this sounds kind of outlandish, but they could have probably used putting Frank on LeBron a little bit more. So he probably would have defended him better than really anybody else on the team did. But needless to say, I rest my case. He only got 12 minutes. The Mavericks relied heavily on their starters, kind of rode the whole way in this one. I wish Jason Kidd would have went to these guys a little bit more, but at the same time, you can make the argument that the Mavericks likely don't win this game if they do. So it's kind of a really tricky domino effect there when you get into it, just in terms of how shorthanded the Mavericks are and how much it's limiting them when they get in these dogfights. They really can't alleviate any pressure from their starters unless they get up by a large margin. Jaden Hardy came in, he hit an and one in transition. I really thought he was going to play more in this game. He only played 6 minutes, but he did have a few really bad turnovers and fouls, had some kind of dumb, costly rookie mistakes on a few possessions, but he was still playing hard and getting after it. I would have liked to see him a little more, even though it was a close game like this, but like I said, I rest my case again. It is what it is. Nobody else played on the Mavericks. Jaren, what did you see out of the Lakers tonight? Obviously we kind of talked about LeBron James and Wenyen Gabriel, who impressed, in his ability as a rim runner and sort of like a defensive chess piece, and his ability to sometimes switch on to smaller guys and be a weak side, rim protector at times as an undersized center. He looked pretty good, having seen him for the second time. Thomas Bryant looked like he, always been a kind of a decent offensive player in the short roll, but has his limitations on defense. But barring that, we didn't really get too much into everybody else. I think, we got into Westbrook's impact in the first half a little bit, but Lakers had a very big rotation tonight. What did you have to make of some of their point of attack players, just in terms of how Westbrook, Nunn, Schroeder, even Christie at times played in this game.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I'll go top to bottom with Westbrook. I mean, we already alluded to this multiple times this podcast, but he was just able to really just attack the Mavericks' lack of defense. Whenever they refused to step up on him, he would either, hit the 3-point shot, in which he went 50% in this game, or he would just seemingly blow past the defenders. Didn't really matter who was on him. He was able to finish with
there
28
were
points.
like, well, it wasn't hyper efficient. I was gonna say, I hate to interrupt you, but like, well, it wasn't a hyper efficient game. He did look like the Westbrook of old to an extent,
No, he did. He did.
So I mean, it was a great game from him. I thought Kendrick Nunn and Dennis Schroeder didn't have really the best game. They were hard pressed to really be able to make any shots. But I don't know. I think the Lakers could use their ball handling a little more. Like they just don't have a lot of possessions where those guys are handling the ball at the point of attack. Like they almost defer to Westbrook to do that and relegate him to that role completely. Like, I mean, those guys are like competent point guards, and they've had success in their careers at previous stops, getting to the rim and applying pressure and being able to facilitate a little bit. Nunn I know is more kind of a scorer guy, but Schroeder's been always a fairly okay playmaker. But I don't know, they're kind of just using them as shooters to an extent. Like they're definitely not like secondary ball handlers, at least just from the eye test in this game. Maybe I haven't watched enough Lakers game, but it just seems like as if those guys are kind of just standing around at points and are just there to attack off closeouts and shoot the ball because of how limited their shooting depth is.
Yeah, they seemingly rely on Westbrook and LeBron to pretty much do the bulk of the ball handling. Other than that, I mean, Schroeder, I could see him more as a ball handler in the squad, but they don't really use him as that. They're just kind of like a bailout guy. And even with Kendrick Nunn, the possessions that Kendrick Nunn did get, I mean, he scored 12 points this game. I thought he was really effective against the Mavericks in just 19 minutes. I thought he was really effective, as I said. Whenever he was the one, using the ball, dribbling, he was able to kind of be the kick out guy in some scenarios, and that's why he shot and made three 3-point shots. But other than that, I just don't really. I mean, they're just so depleted on like talent and I guess just like ball handlers outside of LeBron and Russell Westbrook, and those guys create so much for themselves that it's hard to create for others. And I mean, I don't know. This team's just so depleted. Juan Toscano-Anderson came in, he played pretty good defense, and then just disappeared after the second half. Didn't really see much of him. Max Christie, he's a second round 19-year-old rookie. In 29 minutes, he had 7 points. He honestly looked pretty effective.
Yeah, he looks promising. Like just
he
looks like a guy who has the ability not just to be like a really good like shooter in this league one day, but if he adds some strength and develops on the defensive end, and he's already got a little bit of a offensive sort of savvy to him where he's pretty decent at attacking off of closeouts and running in transition. I don't think he quite has like the full on ball handling thing there, but I mean he might be a decent player one day. I was kind of intrigued what I saw from him in 29 minutes. I thought he played good, but they're just asking so much for a guy like JTA or Max Christie to be able to start and play those kind of minutes for them. And I mean, it is kind of sad, but the Lakers' third and fourth best players tonight were like pretty definitively Wenyen Gabriel and Troy Brown Jr. And it kind of goes to show their roster, and it is kind of an indictment upon the Mavericks, even as shorthanded as the Mavericks are, that they let this game slip away like this. But like we said, a win is a win, and just happy to escape on a national televised game on TNT against the Lakers. I'd be remiss to say that it wasn't a very fun game, in the fashion that the Mavericks won in double overtime. But you'd rather save your starters the minutes and the mental headache of having to go through a game like this as the Mavericks continue this road trip on the West Coast, and they're matched up against Portland at 9 p.m. on Saturday. Another late game. We'll see how Jason Kidd opts in terms of, maybe if one of the, I know it's on a back-to-back, but if one of those guys, has to rest them, it's a huge heavy dosage of minutes for the starters tonight. We'll see if the Mavericks get back any of their guys on this road trip and Josh Green and Dorian Finney-Smith. Of course, Maxi Kleber is going to remain out with that hamstring tear, but the Mavericks are really depleted right now. And even amidst, all these, wins that they're kind of pulling out there against pretty weak opponents, and they're just barely surviving right now. And I'm happy they're surviving, but they sorely need to get some of these role players back, or, go one or two more games, even if, you get Josh back and Dorian's still out. Like, I think this team has a shelf life in terms of how much production they're going to be able to expel onto the court, because I mean, Luka's having games where he's getting depleted and still just laying it all out on the table. Like, I just don't know how much longer this Mavericks team is going to be able to continually persist with this sort of style at the moment. But I mean, I guess we'll see as we go forward, Jaren. Do you have any lasting thoughts, maybe in terms of how badly the Mavericks need to get some of these role players back, or anything before we end the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm hoping on this Portland trip that, Josh Green comes back. And as you said, just even Josh Green will help dramatically in terms of this team and how depleted they are defensively and offensively.
No, 100%. So we're hoping for that, because this team is merely surviving right now. Like we said, we're happy they got the win. They're surviving, but something needs to change, whether that's just those guys coming back from injuries, or, just finding a way to get these starters more rest. Because, if the Mavericks are going to actually make a run at the playoffs, or just getting into the playoffs this year, and who knows how far they'll go, of course, but, they were very much burnt out last year come the Western Conference Finals. It's looking to be even worse this year. So this is definitely an issue they're going to have to attend to. But that'll wrap it up for today. I'm glad that they got a fun overtime victory, 119-115. The Mavericks win in double overtime versus the Lakers amidst a very nice clutch time performance by Luka Doncic and Christian Wood. Not really much else to get into. Great game. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at mainstream_Mavs. Subscribe to us and follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or whatever listening platform that you listen on, or if you're watching rather than listening, on YouTube. If for those of you that don't know, we're on YouTube now, of course, Mainstream Mavs Podcast. Look us up, or go to our link tree in our Twitter bio, which you can find our YouTube. We're posting these podcasts in video format now for everybody to see. So if that's your method of choice, make sure to like and comment and subscribe on the video. Comment anything you enjoyed about the podcast or about the game last night. We'll respond to you, get back at you, hit you up on YouTube. And of course, like the video and subscribe, helps us out a lot. We appreciate you guys listening/watching us, and we will catch you guys in the next one after Saturday night against Portland.
Bye-bye.